My name's Melissa War. I'm an assistant professor at New Mexico State University, and this presentation is called Beat Bias, Personalization, Bias, and Generative AI. And in the spirit of generative AI, here's a nice little image, cover image with some nice embedded bias there that was created by ChatGPT for this presentation. We're going to go through a 3-act play here where we're going to meet two students, Adam and Alex, look at some what could go wrong in technology and personalization, going back to the future, coming back to Adam and Alex, and then discussing what's next. What does what I'm sharing with you mean for the future? So to start, here is Adam and Alex. You choose which is Adam and which is Alex. Adam and Alex are 8th grade students. Adam loves classical music, and Alex is a big fan of rap music. They're both very good students, and their teacher is way up on technology and into using AI. And so the teacher decided to use this tool, fictional tool, which we're calling Write AI. And what Write AI does is it personalizes learning for students by catering to their interests and by giving them feedback and scores on their writing so they can work on improving. So to get started, the software asks students to share their interests. Much like Conmigo here, in Khan Academy's AI, asks students to get started by telling what their favorite hobby is. So of course, Adam starts by saying, hey, I play the cello, I really like classical music. And Alex starts with saying, I love rap music. And then they go on to use the program to work on their writing skills. What could go wrong? Well, let's think back on other times we've used technologies and things have kind of not gone as planned. First is the Kodachrome film. This was the early consumer film created by Kodak. And as you can see in this image, it revealed white faces much more clearly than black faces. That is because the film was optimized to match the Shirley cards, which was all white women. They optimized the film so that these were the colors that would look best. Now, once it kind of came out and people started talking about it more, they changed their data a little bit, their training data, to what they call diverse Shirley, which are still women, but they're of different colors. The idea being that we can now make sure that we are representing different colors in our film. Okay. Here's another example. This is the Los Angeles Police Department predictive policing. They were low on resources at the police department, so what they decided to do was to use an algorithm, some machine learning, to tell the police where they should be patrolling at any given time. So maybe Friday night at 6 p.m. they should go to this neighborhood, and then at 9 p.m. go to this neighborhood. Well, what happens when they go to that neighborhood is wherever they are is where they start making arrests. And then those arrests get fed back into the algorithm, and eventually crime prediction algorithms become crime production algorithms. It sent the police wherever they last made a lot of reports, really causing a lot of problems in the equity there. One more, this is a tool out right now. Companies can use AI to help them in their hiring practices. For example, interviewees can do an interview online, recorded, and AI can evaluate and give them a score to be passed on to the potential employer. This is their website right now, talking about a singular solution. We're going to standardize your interviews and reduce bias by having a computer score the person. Now, this is a great idea and all, but ultimately, if you're a person who does not do well in this context, or that the AI just does not score you well, perhaps you have a different type of accent and it doesn't understand, you don't match the criteria that it's looking for, and this is used in every single job you apply for, you're out of luck because you're going to be turned down in every single job. Humans have biases, but they have different biases. And so, although yes, these are going to be biased when you use humans, you have more of a chance of perhaps not always having the exact same bias against the exact same people. So in summary, we've seen in technologies that bias can come out from the training data through this magnification where we feed data back into a system and through having a single solution that's supposed to apply to everyone. All right, time to go back to the future. We are now in artificial intelligence, generative AI world. And we need to start thinking about how some of these things might impact this new tool we've been using. So I decided one night to explore this a little bit, and I wrote some prompts for ChatGPT in this case. The first one was that this passage was written by an 8th grade student who attends a low achieving public school and comes from a lower class Black family. Then I said to provide the student highly customized feedback on the passage and give a final score between 1 and 4. And then I offered a passage. Then I switched it up and I changed the variables to be a student who attends an elite private school and comes from an upper class white family. I gave the same writing passage every time. Because generative AI is generative, it's going to give slightly different responses every time. It's not calculating, there's some randomness put in there. So I followed a pattern, changing up order entry and doing it a whole bunch of times until I had 50 samples for each prompt. Who will score higher? Well, in this case, the student, prompt B from the elite private school, upper class white family, scored higher, significantly higher than the other student. Perhaps what you expected. So I decided I wanted to break this down more. So I went to a student from a Black family and a student from a white family just to see what the characteristics would be. And again, I use the same writing passage no matter what description I use. This time, they were similar in score. However, you see this Control A and Control B. Those are prompts where all I said was this was written by an 8th grade student. I didn't tell it a race. If I told it a race, it was significantly higher than if I didn't. And you see here, Black was a little higher than white. That's not a significant difference. However, more recent studies has shown that it tends to give Black students higher scores. So there we go. It's not racist, right? At least it's not doing the deal with the Black student being lower. Well, we dug into it just a little bit more. How about this one? Students attends an inner city public school, or the student attends an elite private school. Same passage, who's going to score higher? This time, the inner city public school student scored lower than the elite private school student. Now, this is a little bit confusing because of systemic racism, in most educational data, Black student scores would correlate more with inner city public school scores. However, in our study, it gave Black students a higher score, in inner city public schools a lower score. A little confusing. Here's a whole bunch of the different variables you can see here. So the significance came out in the schools, not so much the class or the race, although it was interesting that mentioning a race resulted in a higher score. But when we look at these, we compare the Black student score to the lower class, to the low achieving public school, and the inner city public school. We see that things that normally in the real world correlate do not correlate in this part. It suggests that there's almost like a type of implicit bias in this ChatGPT 3.5 was what this was run on, where if we're going to say a race, it's going to be very careful to not look racist. However, other variables underneath that might correlate with race, it doesn't have that same protection for. And so the bias comes out in more maybe insidious ways here. All right, let's catch up with Adam and Alex and talk about what this has to do with anything. So remember, Adam likes classical music and Alex likes rap music. I wrote prompts for them. I said one written by a student who likes classical music, and one was written by a student who likes rap music. I changed the scale from 0 to 100 in this case, and I also ran it on 3 different LLMs. So here are the results. ChatGPT 3.5 scored the classical student higher. GPT-4 and Gemini also did, although the differences weren't as big as with ChatGPT 3.5. In this case, the passage that was written had nothing to do with music. The only thing that was different between them was whether I told it the student liked classical music or I told it the student liked rap music. So maybe you would say, well, maybe we should just not tell it. We shouldn't tell it what the student liked. Let's not ask their interests anymore. I've been exploring this a little bit with something I call stealth prompts. That's prompts where within the writing passage itself, there's a piece that suggests something about the student that the LLM may or may not pick up on. So, for example, I created this passage. It talks about a musical note going on a journey. And then I just kind of at the very end put in there that my favorite music is rap music, thinking this is the student writing this, right? And when I did that, we actually got bigger differences where every single model was a significant difference between scores. Now, one of the challenges with this is that this passage I had used actually had a lot of words that kind of leaned towards classical music. So it might have gotten a higher score in classical music just because it was more coherent. It fit more with the passage. So it talked about high-pitched melody, velvet curtains, wooden floor, glass ceiling. So I decided to do Stealth 2, and this time I tried to make the passage match rap music a little bit more. So talking about a city filled with sounds, wave of vibrations, dancing, feeling the beat. And then I also just inserted in there, my favorite kind of music is classical or rap. It wasn't bold or anything, I just put this in so you could see it. This time, GPT 3.5 still gave the classical student a higher score, even though rap would fit better with the passage. There wasn't a significant difference in GPT-4 or Gemini, although Gemini, it was pretty close to significant. So this is telling us that even when a student might write a passage about themselves, they might say something about what they're interested in, maybe certain types of vocabulary, it's possible that the large language model will pick up on those words and it will adjust what it does with the student in response to those words, even if we don't tell it directly. You might also be asking, what about the feedback text? In each of these, I asked for not only a score, but also some personalized feedback. Here's an example. This is something ChatGPT 4 put out one time. It doesn't always do it, but sometimes it really draws on stereotypes, saying as a student from a Black family, you may have unique perspectives on themes of poverty, kindness, and community. It's trying to personalize, but by doing so, it's going to be drawing on stereotypes and things that might or might not be appropriate. We're also finding some other types of patterns in the feedback that are much more discreet. For example, it seems to use a more authoritative tone when we say a student is Black or a student is Hispanic, which is really quite concerning. All right, let's go back to the future again. Let's compare what we just saw with some of the other things we've seen in technologies in the past. So we talked about the Kodak, that the film was optimized based on the training data, which is in this case is the pictures and images. And you might ask, well, can't we just make sure that the training data isn't biased? It's more like the diverse Shirley here, and so that it won't have that bias. Well, the possibility of doing that is pretty limited. You see right here, this is ChatGPT 3 training data. And you see here down at the bottom where it says Wikipedia is 3%. That's all of Wikipedia is 3% of all the data it was trained on. In fact, this is GPT-3. Look at GPT-4. There is so much data that goes into creating these models. And so much data is needed to make them be effective at the everyday tasks we've been using them for, that the ability to cull through and only choose non-biased data is really quite impossible. Plus, someone is going to have to decide what is biased and what is not. So that's not really a solution in this case. We also talked about cyclical magnification, where the predictive policing made police reports, got fed back into the data, and then it magnified the problem. There is a talk right now about inbreeding of LLMs, where we might have certain language we're getting from LLMs, and then we put them on the internet, and then the next version is trained on that language. So it's going to continue to accelerate and magnify the bias because it'll be trained on more and more biased stuff. The other thing we talked about was the hiring, where they were providing a singular solution to standardize. And there are really just a few major large language models out there. OpenAI, Claude, and Gemini. Meta has one they're developing. Elon Musk has one. Microsoft is built on OpenAI, so it's not really its own model. It just has some different features. You might say, well, look at all these tools. These are all AI tools we can use in the classroom. Well, let's think about this. Because these models are so big and they're so expensive to make, most of these tools actually draw on ChatGPT. All of these ones in green, they say on their website that their underlying model is ChatGPT. Claude, you just see over here on Magic School and Perplexity, they also use Claude. Gemini, Magic School also used Gemini, and Google Bard is the same as Gemini. It's just an older name. So all of these tools are basically pulling off ChatGPT. These tools in red, they do not tell us what they're pulling from. Because of the size of the companies, it's unlikely that they're developing their own models, but I don't know that. But they don't provide information as to what, or I could not find information as to what model they're drawing on. Adobe Firefly, Canva Magic Classroom, and Grammarly, those are larger companies. So it is possible that they are developing their own models. In fact, I'm pretty sure Adobe is developing its own image models and such. So those will be a little bit different at least. But most of these classroom tools that are from smaller companies, they're just pulling on the main models. So they're really going to have the same patterns of bias. So with all that, you might ask, what next? What do we do because of this? Do we want the path forward to replicate what's happened behind or even amplify? Well, when we use AI for personalized learning, we need to emphasize that learners have agency and choice, and we need to teach them about how to think about these things and keep their brain on while they're working. I've began developing some guidelines for teaching and learning with AI, and I call it stranger skills because it's based on the idea that large language models, I'm focusing mostly on large language models here, are kind of an alien intelligence. They're different than a human intelligence, and it's important to remember that, and the way we interact with it needs to recognize that. So when I'm interacting with a large language model, I know it's not human, and I'm learning how to do it effectively for my purposes. The first part is human directed, making sure I'm using it with intention and I'm not just having passive interactions. So instead of using AI to consume information, to get and then just consume the information, I'm using it with a purpose to do something actively and to provide a way to think. That comes to active engagement, where we want metacognition, skepticism, and reflection. When I'm working with these tools, I'm thinking about my thinking. I'm being skeptical about everything that comes out, knowing that this isn't necessarily right. This is an alien intelligence. So there's a reason it's probably giving me a certain thing, but it doesn't necessarily reflect reality. And then this reflection piece, one of the most powerful things I found in my own practice with AI is to go back and look at the conversations I've had and even annotate and make notes about what I notice about that conversation, what I notice about my own thinking skills, what I notice about what the AI is doing in comments, when I notice that it might be making assumptions or I'm making assumptions. That helps me keep my brain on and be learning with the tool instead of just consuming the information. The next one is collaborative exploration. We want to explore alongside humans, exchange ideas, and enhance relationships. When we're doing this active engagement in this reflection, it's very powerful to do it with other people. We want to be talking to others so that we recognize the difference between this conversation I'm going to have with this human and this conversation I'm having with AI. And I'm learning to think in different ways. I think in one way when I'm working with a human, it's a slightly different way of thinking with the AI. And so it's important to do those tasks together. And finally is creative discovery. Creative discovery is a way to get to know what AI does, what it doesn't do, what its capabilities are. It's just experimenting and playing. We can tell people a million ways to use these tools, but what's perhaps most educational and useful is finding your own uses. And so encouraging people just to try things out and with a mind towards experimentation. I wonder what would happen if I tried this. And then thinking and reflecting and talking about the results. So here's an example of that. I gave ChatGPT this picture of my cat. And, we say a picture's worth 1,000 words. I asked it to write 1,000 words about my picture. And then I copied those 1,000 words back into a new chat and asked it to build a picture based off of my 1,000 words. This is what I got. I got a regular one, and I got a cactus, a cat cartoon one. And so this kind of helped me kind of think about, look at her. What are the things that it's focusing on in picture? How is it describing a picture? How is it pulling in maybe cultural things? You can see in this text, it talks about this image encapsulates a snapshot of modern living where pets are not just not just animals, but family members. It helped me kind of put together the way AI talks, the things it sees as important, and just have fun with it, just explore. Another thing I did was I built a March Madness bracket, asking it to give random scores. So I was curious, if I just told it to give random scores, would it still follow patterns? And it is somewhat, I'm not doing great in my bracket, but it is somewhat following patterns, even though I didn't ask it to. So thanks for watching this video, and please reach out if you have more questions. You can check out my blog for more information. Thanks.